Greetings, it is I, Tantisnar of Dracovin, your Lord and Emperor here at the Dracovin Empire, and welcome. Today we are going to be diving deep into more Pathfinder, the world of Golarion. Of course, today I'm bringing you yet another one of the many myriad of races that you can learn about, species I should say, or ancestries, as it is now known in Pathfinder. All these terms have been synonymous for what you are playing. I guess ancestry is more appropriate now. But the ancestries of Golarion and their origins, history, culture, and kind of stuff like that. I've discussed a few of them before. Today we're diving into the gnome. Or if you want to be silly, gnome, which is technically incorrect, but whatever. Joking aside. So, we're going to learn all about the gnomes, their history, and things about them. So let's start with the basics that I usually start with, and let's move over here quickly. And let's talk about what you're going to use for books and materials. That is the wrong page. I had the page open, and you decided not to follow it. Of course, it changes mind right away. Anyway, here we go. So, there are 3 books that I would recommend you check out. Otherwise, you could use things like the Pathfinder Wikipedia to reference them. The Gnomes of Golarion has most of this information. So, it's slightly more condensed on the Pathfinder Wikipedia page and gives a lot of the basics. But if you want to go into the most amount of depths about this information, the Gnomes of Golarion is the best book for this. So this is the one I would highly recommend. It has the most amounts of information about all the things I'm going to talk about, and it goes even to more depths than a lot of things that I'm going to talk about here. The first world, Realms of the Fae, is another one that provides some information here as part of the campaign setting. The Inner Sea World Guide, and of course, the campaign settings. These 4 books here make the setup of what defines gnomes. So let's start with gnomes. And what I'm showing here is the first world. Why am I showing the first world to you here? Well, gnomes are not native to Golarion. They don't come from Golarion. They're not really suited to life in Golarion. They're from the first world. They're a Fae from the realm of the first world. They, for unknown reasons, which we'll talk about, were set adrift from their home in the first world and have ended up here on Golarion. And this is just a representation of first world. The damage of that exodus, the first world being a land of Fae and known as land of endless possibilities, has been significant to them. The realm of the Fae is a place where physics and reality alter on so many levels. It is a place of, could be literally described as dreams almost. And you're going to a world that is a physical reality. It ain't good for you. But that's gnomes in a nutshell. That's what's happened to them. They've ended up in a place that's damaged them. So, let's talk about gnomes. They're on the shorter side, around 3 feet in height. They kind of are very slender, almost unnervingly. Again, it's a lot of that fayness to them, makes them seem a little unnatural to them. So they are a little taller than halflings if you compare them in size. They age just like any other mortal. Slow age. They don't live as long as elves, but pretty long. And something I will talk about is they do suffer from a condition known as bleaching. We'll talk about that in a minute, but that is a condition that they will suffer from. Long, spindly fingers, large heads, a little different shape than most humanoids. They're very tough. Their bones are actually harder and lighter than most humans. Their coloration is actually altered by experience, too, just like their aging. Their skin, hair, eyes runs the gamut of colors that mostly appear in nature, and a lot of them, unfortunately, do reveal their Fae-like nature. A lot of them have skin tones that match the other humanoids in the regions they live, but with tints of olive and gold. Their hair is the one that stands out the most, with vibrant colors expressing the recent history experiences in reds, greens, moors. It can be browns and blondes too. It just, you never know what it's going to be for a gnome. It could be whatever color. They have very expressively long eyebrows, childlike eyes, and those kind of a very wide, almost unnatural smile. If we're talking about males and females, males do tend to be a little larger and not quite as slender. Females, again, still fit the idealism of what feminine is for most species. Usually with a little longer eyelashes, slimmer waists. Any kind of difference that you get between, like, humans for sexual dimorphism, gnomes tend to match. Let's talk the bleaching, because that's an important part of all of this that we have to discuss. It's a major part. So, the first world, as I said, land of imaginations and possibility, where the rulers of the plane, the eldest, can reshape the reality of it at a whim. Golarion is a world of magic and wonder, but it's a physical reality. It's got rules. It's got a set of rules built into it that give it kind of a natural law. As much as magic and supernatural powers can change and alter that law, and it's really only temporary or controlled, and the reality itself wants to go back to that thing there. And gnomes from a world of basically dreams and endless possibility, they're being constrained into a world of reality. And in order to combat that fight against them, that's where the fighting of the bleaching comes in. They innovate, they dream, they want to experience different things. And a gnome that doesn't have new experiences, exciting experiences, bleaches. It's a discoloration of them. Almost an unnatural aging of the gnome. It has physical and psychological decline, a loss of charisma. They go into depression, apathy, and those at the end, madness and death. The exact origin of the bleaching, most gnomes feel that it's tied to their exodus to the mortal world, but it's still a mystery. The first time a gnome will face the bleaching is early adulthood. Blanching skin, eyes, hair color. The experience you've led alters this. Shocking and vivid a gnome's life. The more it is, the more color you become yourself, basically in early adulthood. If you have lack of excitement, you get a fading color accompanied by this spiral into death. Because of this effect, there is the idea that gnomes are immune to normal aging. That is something that is talked about by other ancestors. But it is actually untrue. They age just like any other. So this is something that is like, you can also have normal aging happen at the same time as this. And again, they don't quite live as long as elves, but still a long time. So you, as a gnome, have to deal with, I'm getting older, I'm also fighting off the bleaching. So the two things at once. And, you know, as you get older, you need more to stave off the bleaching. More experience, more excitement. And as you get older, you have more responsibilities, you have more connections to gnomish society, so it kind of is counterintuitive. It's sort of like, I have all these responsibilities I have to do as I've elded to become the elder of my society, but crap, I've got to do all these crazy shit in order to get rid of the bleaching. So a lot of older gnomes will do things that will, you know, like, I best describe it as like, you know, if there was skydiving, you know, where you're pulling a parachute at the last possible minute, they go and do that to try to get the most amount of excitement and plenty of them would die from it, and that's what happens. They do very crazy stuff and just die sometimes. Once the bleaching has begun, it's not impossible to stop. It is difficult for a variety of reasons. But they can stop the psychological and physiological drain of them, get some color back, get them back into life. There's a gnomish organization that's very important for this called the Wonder Seekers. They are in the Inner Sea region, and their goal is to battle bleaching and to help those that are having trouble with it. So they find out about individuals that are suffering from it and do their best to go around and, help them experience some wonder, stave off the bleaching. They collect things that will help with that. Stories, items, examples of experiences, and, stuff that they could be like, hey, go do this, or, oh, check this out, or, here's an interesting story, do you want to hear about it? Stuff that, the gnome that's under the effect of the bleaching can kind of start perking up, and they can bring them back. So, the reason... Okay, because of this, there is a problem, though. Gnomes, in general, in their society, see the bleaching as preventable. Yes, they all suffer from it. But, if you succumb to it, it's because you didn't do enough to succumb to it. It's like, and there's sympathy for those that are going through the bleaching, but again, it's like, you could have done more for yourself. And so there is also other stigmas about it, because again, it's a fatal disorder, so there's fear to these gnomes, too. And again, the sympathetic, but blaming them, and also a little bit of fear because they're going to death, can lead to isolation, leading to a spiral, leading to more bleaching, and yes. That's why the Wonder Seekers are very valuable to sort of counteract this. Now, the Bleachlings. We have to talk about them before we finish up talking about this. So, at the end of the bleaching, most gnomes, if you're suffering from it, die horrifically. But some, rarely, are able to reach a state of almost an emotional void, a plateau. This is oftentimes fueled by some kind of trauma that kind of almost drives the individual into this kind of pushes them back in, but it's not enough to bring them back. So they're right at the end of the bleaching, and this trauma occurs, and it's this distorted state of consciousness. And the big thing about it is they are immune to further affliction of the bleaching. Unfortunately, by now, their skin, hair, eyes are seemingly colorless or incredibly muted tones. Their demeanors will be calm, dreary, and most of them, it'd take a lot to get them angry at you. The bonus that they have here is that their connection to the first world is incredibly strong. They've got more wisdom, they can communicate with animals, and they have a almost ageless existence. Usually a bleachling is around middle age before this kind of can come about. And pretty much at that point, they cease to age. So, they're seen very strangely in gnomish society. Some call them great heroes because they've faced death and come back from it, returned from the grave. Others see them as strange monsters, the worst example of them. Regardless, they tend to be very solitary, and again, they're permanently suffering from an affliction that kills most. And they also do, because they've got this revelation on the first world. See the other gnomes as kind of those that haven't learned the truth, or they're like still immature. They're butterflies that have yet to emerge from the cocoon. And the fear and prejudice that their kind can have against them drives them away. So a lot of them, when they get afflicted with this, will go to things like mountaintops, forests, far away, places where the natural balance can become. And many bleachlings will become druids because of this. Because they have this greater connection to the natural world and to the first world, to Fae. They tend to be nature connected. So that's the bleaching and bleachlings. Let's talk about adventuring. Because this is an important thing to talk about too. Because most gnomes tend to be adventurers of some kind. Why? Well, what better way to gain experience to basically fend off the bleaching than go places, explore, do some things there, be an adventurer, have the experience. So these adventuring gnomes get mementos, things to remember or relive the excitement they've had. Because then they can reconnect not only to themselves, but they can also share that with others. If they have a connection to magic, great spellcasters. Primal magics like druids or primal sorcerers are the best out of them. But again, gnomish adventures are a pretty big thing and exist in a lot of them. Alright, let's talk gnomish history. Because we've kind of hit it on a first little bit here. So, we know they come from the first realm, the Fae. They were ancient, immortal, mischievous Fae in the first world. Happy with the endless wonders of their life, indulging in their curiosity and whimsy, and it's believed that they are a Fae that's closely related to leprechauns. Important to note here, there are gnomes still in the First Lands. Not all of them left. So there are Fae gnomes still left. But the earliest gnomes and the mass migration of them really occurred during the Age of Anguish. This was the period right after Age of Darkness. Age of Darkness is after the Starstone collided with Golarion. It was the big apocalypse. I've talked about it in other videos before. Basically created a lot of problems. Age of Darkness was right after that. And it was about negative 4204 AR that Age of Anguish began. This is when the cloud that was kicked up from the Starstone falling has pretty much settled. Civilizations beginning to rebuild. Societies are doing... Things are happening, but gnomes show up. Some have remained behind and live immortal in the first realm, but a bunch of them came to Golarion. No one knows why. One theory, which does hold some merit, is because gnomes are ever curious. Many of them were interested in the cycle of death that happened in the material plane. They were immortal in the first world. So they hoped to gain souls and could become part of the cycle, traveling Golarion. It was unfortunate that those that came there didn't get souls. But, and there's an important but, beings born on the material plane can gain souls. So those that stayed behind had children, their children had souls, and therefore were able to pass on to the afterlife after they died. Now, bringing us another reason here is the eldest, Shaika. Again, the eldest being the lords of the first world, the Fey lords, and Shaika, being one of them, shown here in many forms. Okay. Shaika's idea is connected to another reason that claims it was a darker reason. There was some kind of cataclysm, similar to the fall of the Starstone, that heralded the Age of Darkness, and they fled from the first world. Shaika gives a version of this, but only believes it, doesn't know for sure. Which, again, not all the Eldest... The Eldest are Fey Lords, they're not omnipotent. It knows that they were expelled from the First World to the Material Plane by Pharasma for worshipping another Eldest, whose name's forgotten, and who stole a piece of the River of Souls to create a semblance of mortality on the First World as a game. That's Shaika's story. Is that true? Who knows? Now there are two other gnome groups that we will talk about at the end of today. The Spriggans and the Svirfneblin. Spriggans will explain them, and the Svirfneblin will explain them. But regardless, we see gnomes now on Golarion. Yep. They've arrived. They're alive. They're here. The bleaching kills many of them. A lot of their magic that they had is gone. So many of them die to predators and creatures. And it's this kind of first time that gnomes were in Golarion. They almost went extinct on the plane. But they did adapt, formed enclaves of themselves to kind of build themselves up, and over the last 8,000 years have become members of Golarion. So, when it comes to gnome society, for the need for fending off bleaching, they favor hobbies, professionisms, objects to attach themselves to their world, basically anchors to their reality, to their life, to their family, to their connections. So things like friendship stories, exotic outfits, perfumes, gadgets, riddles, all kinds of exciting things are great. Gnomes will form small pockets throughout Golarion. The Inner Sea region is the most common, with Chelix, Capadish, the Mongi Expanse, Nyx, Osirian, River Kingdoms, the Steaming Sea, and Varisia having the most population of gnomes. And the biggest population of gnomes, perhaps on all of Golarion, is the city shown here of Brasselwalk in Chelish. It's in eastern Cheliax. You know, mostly gnomes. Pretty much only gnomes. They're self-governed. King Drum Thornfiddle is the leader, and they're an open vassal of the Queen of Cheliax. So, it's the main known habitat. So, when it comes to gnomes, let's talk about things for relationships for gnomes, because this is a very important one to kind of delve into how gnome society works. So, because experience is important, so are intimate relationships. It's another experience. Long-term monogamy or formal marriages are very rare for gnomes. Not impossible, but they tend to be very, let's have a relationship here. Cool, we had our experience, we move on. Gnomes have these for relationships very intentional. They choose to. And the same can be said of reproduction. So, basically what happens is, at some point, a gnome will decide to start a family, or at least have a kid. And it's an exciting adventure worth undertaking. Before then, many will be prudent and use some kind of contraception, something unnatural, or have relationships with other races, things like that, and eventually they will decide to procreate. It means that having a child is pretty much the woman's choice in gnomish society. It's pretty much it, it's some point in time, gnomish woman decides to have a child. Granted, they could have a discussion with their partner and their partner could suggest it or something like that, especially if you're looking for someone to have a male gnome having a child. They could talk with it and find a female that's like, yeah, I'm up for that, It's gnome society. Again, not very monogamous, at least long term, and marriage, very rare. Once the female gnome is pregnant, their gestation is kind of variable, morning worm, and unlike the standardization of around 9 months for a human, gnomes can have a gestation anywhere from 6 months to a year. Nothing different between them. Both those babies will be born perfectly fine. And babies are born alert, full of color and life, and walk in about 6 months. Gnome families, in this retrospect, are very loosely associated. A gnome will be raised by the gnome community just as much as the gnome's birth parents. And a lot of other species will see this as almost negligence, this kind of detached relationship, but everybody's the family kind of in gnomes, so it's perfectly reasonable to them, everybody's helping raise the child. Gnome names. Let's talk about that for a second. So males like to have exceedingly long, hard-to-pronounce names, while female names are very short. But the thing about the female names is some do claim they're actually abbreviations for much longer ones. So something like Bastarger, or Lumroller, or Poshment are male names, while a female name would be Besh, Day, Pie, Quek, which also comes down to what gnomes speak. Gnomish language. And they do speak the common tongue, but the Gnomish language, it has one of the largest vocabularies in all of Golarion. So if you want a language that has an insane vocabulary, you go to Gnomish. And the language evolves. It has changed dramatically since they came to Golarion, and it continues to evolve and change. There are some similarities with both Aklo and Sylvan. Sylvan making sense, again, that's a more nature fey language. Gnomes, remember, gnomes are fey. They are weird. They are fey that chose to become mortals. They are unusual. And let's talk about who they worship. So, they tend to worship these standard deities. They do prefer nature, magic, freedom, beauty, with Caden Kalian, Desna, Erastil, Gozareth, Nethys, Norgrimmar, and Shelyn being very popular. The gnome worshippers depict them as gnome versions of themselves for their worship. There is one particular gnome goddess we're going to mention, the Svirfneblin goddess, which I'm going to butcher the heck out of this name because thanks gnome, Nivi Rambodazzle. She is very unique because she is only a gnome deity, but she is not really worshipped on the surface very much. There are some surface gnomes that worship her, which we'll talk about. Which we'll talk about her when we talk about Svirfneblins in a second here. Of course. But we'll talk about it here. Anyway. So, the last thing we can mention here in all this is one of the gnomes' most favorite of all Golarion holidays, which they favor more than any other holiday, and that's, of course, Jestercap. The gnomes of Andorra, Druma, and Taldor, it is their favorite holiday. It is a holiday that is the end of the month of Lamashtan, usually around the 27th. The day moves around. It's usually the last star day of the month. And, yeah. Originally, it was supposed to be kind of more of a joking day, making fun of Taldor's weakness, and their decline. In a way, it was kind of, because of this decline, it was made to distract the Taldian population, kind of get some revelry, comedic entertainments, some jesters, but it changed into a holiday that is just very different. Pranks, jokes, japes on companions, neighbors, rivals, as long as there's no lasting harm, and humiliations inflicted before midnight are taken in stride. There can be jokes taken too far, but of course, it's a hell of an experience for gnomes. And that's why gnomes love it. Let's talk the two gnome groups that are basically subgroups. Svirfneblin. These are one of the two. They're deep gnomes. So, basically, when gnomes came to Golarion, some of them fled the surface. The reasoning, hard to understand, but they left the surface, and in doing so, maintain a deeper connection to the first world, the realm of the Fae, than their surface-born companions. So, they do look, in general, similar to the Overburn, or their slang for their surface cousins. But they have rocky gray or brown skin, pale, oversized eyes. Males are always bald, while females have some gray, stringy hair. They're emotionally erratic, a lot more than your average gnome, so they can vacillate between very cold detachment to you and violent outbursts. They are a little xenophobic, kind of keeping to their own communities. It's suggested their decision to settle in the Darkland was kind of prompted to keep an eye on evil Fae that are in the Darkland, that had escaped the first world, that are basically like, hey, wait a second, these people from the realm we came on that are very evil and terrible, we should look out for them. But energies of the Darklands have changed them into what they are now. They're opponents to Duergar, fought numerous wars with them past, and the problem with that is because of that, Svirfneblin, they don't consider surface dwarfs different from Duergar Grey Dwarfs, which, it's just, they live underground, they fight the Duergar all the time, they don't see a difference. It's unfortunate kind of racism. And they also don't like mites, which are down there. And they live in secret luminescent cities that very few others in the Darklands would know about. The largest settlement is the hidden city of Dwimmelvel in the Skemia layers. So, yeah. They speak Gnome. They speak Undercommon. Because of their isolationisms, they don't really make friends with others. But if you do manage to make a friend with a deep gnome and you're an outsider, you're given a bonding stone, which is like a small stone amulet that will symbolize your relationship. Now let's talk about Nimbi Rombadazzle, the deity of the Svirfneblins. So, who the heck is Nimbi? Well, Nimbi was once a mortal gnome, loved gambling, games of chance. She owed a lot of money to people, fled from her creditors, ended up in the Darklands, saw the wonders and sights there, and was one of the first gnomes to stave off the effects of the Bleaching by embracing a new life below the surface of Golarion. So she's different than normal Svirfneblin, as she's more of a surface gnome that became a Svirfneblin. She traded a special gem to Torag, the dwarven god, and became a demigoddess. And so is considered the first Svirfneblin, mother of the race. Whether there's stuff to that, there are questions, of whether she's the first one or not, but, there's also suggestions that the problems in the first world were her fault, that it was maybe why they ended up kicked out of the first world. Cough, 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 cough. Maybe. But she lives in the plane of Earth. And mostly followed by Svirfneblin. But there are some surface gnomes, usually adventurers who have dealt with the Svirfneblin, that know of her divinity. And because she is one that staved off bleaching and became a goddess, there are those that are suffering horribly from bleaching that actually kind of follow her as a chance to find a redemption. And, you know, gamblers sometimes hold a... oh, sorry, I did switch to her holy symbol. I almost forgot to. No, that's her holy symbol. I had it earlier. I'm back to it. They might call her a holy symbol of her in homage. The gem cut in the shape of a 6-sided dice with 7 pips on one side. So, let's talk Spriggan. That's the next one I wanted to go to. Spriggan! So who are the Spriggan? They're gray-skinned humanoids. Disheveled, ugly gnomes is the best way to describe them. They are descendants of gnomes that came from the first one to Golarion, but just focused on survival. And didn't embrace community or creativity. They are known as the Lonely Ones by other gnomes. And their bodies and minds have warped too far that they couldn't even resist the bleaching when they came to Golarion. So the curiosity of gnomes has been transformed to feral cunning and exceptional survival. Gnomes try to help their dark kin. Oh, I'm sorry. I should do this one because it's tall, right? No, that's not the right page again. I had to look this up here. That's the one here. That's the right page. There we go. This was what I got in the last minute here for looking this up. The Spriggan. I forgot about them as I was reading up some stuff in the gnome book before we started. But, yeah. Theoretically, none have ever been successfully redeemed. Even though other gnomes still hold out hope, maybe, that these distant cousins can find redemption. There are some rumors of a Spriggan city in the Mawgi Expanse. Probably the town of Ekolokoloba. Bahada. I'm butchering the heck out of that one. And the Eloko there. And in Quadria, a lot of them can be found in the Taper Forest. So, Spriggans. But, yeah. That's it for Gnome. So that's the Gnome. Lost children in the first world. They were Fae. Beyond why they left the first world, which there are so many stories why, it is seen that definitely something went wrong with them leaving the first world, coming to Golarion. Evident in the bleaching. But they make do. They find a way. And of course, you have signs that there is still that magic, that fatum in them. Svirfneblins, the Bleachlings, heck, even the Spriggans. All of them are more Fae than mortal in a way. But also in a way, have they given up something? And I think that's the thing that maybe gnomes fear, in a way. Especially now that they've been here for so many generations. That those first gnomes that came to Golarion are long since gone. Passed away. Or returned. Those that have remained, their children, their children's children, and so forth, have become members of the plane. And it's almost like this curse of fatum is still upon them. That maybe they'll never get rid of. But they find a way to make do. Fun, laughter, A couple of pranks here and there. A few jokes between friends. Traveling. Many different relationships. Finding a time where you want to settle down. Well, at least have some kids. Find some, I don't know, love for a couple of decades. Having a heck of a time. I think that's the thing to take away with gnomes, is no matter who you are as a gnome, you always, at least if you can, try to live your life to the fullest. Because certainly if you don't, the bleaching will occur. And it's not to say that things can't happen that can't drive you to the bleaching. Again, like, it's one of those things is certainly it's looked upon as being a preventable problem, but can it be in certain circumstances? That's a question for societies to discuss and stuff like that. But at least there are people out there trying to help the gnomes. The bleaching gnomes with, like, the Wonder Seekers. See, my brain didn't work there for a second. But anyway, they're an interesting ancestry, and with a very interesting history. Kind of matches with that a lot of the ancestries that make Golarion their home have these origins that are not typical. Every species, at least so far that I've talked about, something's happened to them, and they end up thrown together in a mixed bag society on the surface of the planet in a bunch of nations, and they make do. And certainly, gnomes might be the best at making do. So, I hope you enjoyed learning about them today. Remember, I live stream this on Twitch, and it goes up on YouTube. It's usually every Tuesday, Thursday at around 1 p.m., Saturdays at 11. If you are checking us out on Twitch, remember to follow. If you're checking me out on YouTube, subscribe, like the video, leave a comment, do some engagement. And Discord and Twitter are great places to see what I'm doing and occasional brain farts that I have that I want to talk about. And there are other ways to support me, but those are the core ones I kind of ask for. Yeah. Anyway, I'm going to say farewell to all of you for now, and I will see you all next time for more ancestries, or more Golarion in general. Bye.